Inga mana, inga reo, inga tai wha, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou katoa. Kia ora, muy buenos dias, bienvenidos, bienvenidas. I'm Craig Nicholson, Deputy Director of the Latin America Cape. A very warm welcome again to our 2022 Winds of Change Symposium. We'll start with a traditional incantation, a Māori or First Nations incantation to get us off, to settle us, to warm us into the space. I've put this in the chat, so if you want to have a look at that, and if you want to say it as I'm saying it, join in with me. And there's a translation after that as well that we'll look at. So here we go. Tūtawa mai me karaki tātou. Tūtawa mai I runga, tūtawa mai I raro, tūtawa mai I roto, tūtawa mai I roto, I waho. He tau ai, te maru tū, te mari ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. So what that basically says is come forth from above, from below, from within, and from the environment, vitality and well-being for us all. And we're all strengthened in this unity, which brings us together today in the Winds of Change program. So all the best to everyone, all the presenters, and of course, wonderful to see all of our academic mentors and our guests here today. I'll hand you over now to Professor Chris Moy, the founder of the Winds of Change program. Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Craig. Kia ora koutou, muy buenas tardes a todos in Chile, and good morning to everyone in New Zealand. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is our third Winds of Change Symposium. My name is Chris Moy, and I'm an earth scientist based at Otago University in Dunedin, New Zealand. I helped establish the program in 2020 with a number of Otago colleagues, so a big welcome to you all. The Winds of Change program seeks to support and educate future leaders in New Zealand and Chile to collaboratively develop strategies to tackle the climate change challenges facing our future. This year, we have 22 participants from Chile and New Zealand in the program. 15 of these participants are based in New Zealand, while 7 are based in Chile. So it's a collective group consisting of Chiwis, or Chileans living in New Zealand, and Chileans as well. And these folks join a collaborative network that is now over 100 strong. So we're excited about this new cohort that's participated in this program. We were really excited to introduce you to these participants today. Over the last 6 months, they've been working on collaborative research projects identifying common climate change impacts and potential solutions. Our future depends on culturally aware young leaders like these that can think globally and work collaboratively to engage with to work collaboratively to tackle climate change challenges. We are very proud of what they have accomplished, and we are looking forward to showcasing their successes with you today. We are running today's symposium as a Zoom meeting rather than a webinar, so you'll have the opportunity to engage with our participants more directly in 2 Q&A sessions. With so many people attending, we ask you to help us make this effective by first making sure that your microphone is muted, except of course during the Q&A sessions. If your bandwidth supports it, please keep your video on so our participants can see you. Make sure your first and last name is displayed along with the location you're joining us from. You can do this by clicking on the 3 dots or ellipses on your video feed in the upper right-hand corner. And then please place questions in the chat as the presentations are ongoing, and we'll come back to those questions during the Q&A sessions. We have been leading the Winds of Change program at the University of Otago in New Zealand. I would like to thank all the people that have supported our participants, including our workshop speakers, our mentors, our academic leaders, and the people that have been a part of the project work that our participants will be presenting today. We're really grateful for the Latin America Center for Asia Pacific Excellence, or the CAPES, for supporting this initiative and allowing us to bring together this really impressive cohort of future leaders that you will meet today. So now I'd like to actually introduce to you Dr. Matthew Omar. He's the director of the Latin America Center for Asia Pacific Excellence, and he would like to welcome all of you to our symposium. So over to you, Matthew.
Kia ora tātou, ko Matthew Omar o ke roto o I te Latin America Cape. Hey, Director O Norera, tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning to all of you attending from New Zealand. Ni muy buenas tardes a todos que están con nosotros desde Chile. As Director of the Latin America Cape, it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's third Winds of Change Chile Symposium. On behalf of Chris, Craig, and Natalie, all my colleagues who have brought this event and the program to you, it must just say how delighted we are to have you with us today. We've got academics, students, policymakers, dignitaries. We have the Chile Embassy of New Zealand online, Education New Zealand's Director of Latin American Engagement, several colleagues from the New Zealand Ministry for Primary Industries, and all our participants and speakers. For those of you who are attending, connecting to this program, encountering it for the first time, just a quick word about the organisation bringing it to you, the one with the logo behind me. The Latin America Cape is one of 3 university-based centres of Asia-Pacific excellence. And we've been going 5.5 years, and we're all about creating a step change in New Zealand's knowledge of the Asia-Pacific region and helping Kiwis engage with it and with our Latin American counterparts. Like our sibling capes, which are focused on North Asia and Southeast Asia, we're basically developing the capability of students, businesses, and stakeholders to connect successfully with these regions. And we do so by drawing on university expertise and networks. In the case of our Cape too, we are also working to bring Kiwis closer to Latin America by raising their awareness of the region and the shared challenges and opportunities our societies face. We've developed a number of innovative projects around many audiences. I could list them all, but I'd take up the whole Zoom event. But just examples, we have a diversifying into Latin America workshop program for New Zealand exporters looking at the Latin American market for the first time. We've done an economic report on New Zealand and Latin America's trade relationship. Closer to the theme of this seminar, we did an augmented reality tool and roadshow, an educational product on the Amazon, and we've also developed an exhibition on Mexican food systems, developed by academic students and cultural sector professionals during lockdown. But we're not here to talk about them today. We're gathered instead around another flagship program, one that is led by our consortium partner, University of Otago. It's the Cape's main response to what is acknowledged to be one of the most pressing, perhaps the most pressing issue of our time, climate change. Critically, and I think we're going to see this today, the program highlights commonalities between Aotearoa New Zealand and our closest Latin American neighbour, the one just across the ocean. When I lived in Chile 15 years ago, I could not fail to notice the geographical similarities between the southern halves of our 2 countries. On becoming Cape Director, therefore, I was delighted when Chris suggested the creation of a network of students and young professionals across both countries to reflect together on how our environments are under threat and how we can respond. In a minute, I'll hand back to Chris to run today's event, presenting the collaborations. Once again, they're the result of a year's valiant work, not just from the participants, but from all those working to deliver the program to them. Chris, Natalie, her predecessor, Elaine, and our own Deputy Director, Craig Nicholson. Before I do, however, just one final word. I'd like to highlight the difference the program is already making to relations between our countries. For the first time, the program this year includes connections to Chile's Council of Rectors, CRUCH, with whom we look forward to planning its next iteration in 2023. When CRUCH hosted New Zealand's Minister of Education in Santiago in June too, this program was showcased as an exemplar of trans-Pacific collaboration on sustainability. Clearly, therefore, the program is creating a platform to build on. It spawned a sister program focused on China, which had its inaugural symposium yesterday, and even a spin-off program for schools, The Ocean That Connects Us. Just under 2 months ago, our Cape held a great event in Parliament, New Zealand's Parliament, that showcased the range of research connections between our countries, and geography repeatedly came up. The event said New Zealand and Chile were not separated by the Pacific Ocean, but joined by it, a theme that may serve us today too. So thank you all, therefore, for joining us today to see the latest fruits of this program's initiative and collaboration. Chris, back to you.
Thanks, Matthew. I'm actually going to pass it over to Natalie. I think she's got a video that she wants to share for everyone.
Just bear with me 1 second while I get the screen sharing going. There we go.
Although separated by nearly 10,000 kilometres of Pacific Ocean, Chile and Aotearoa New Zealand are neighbours, linked by the strong southern hemisphere westerly winds that circle Antarctica, not to mention the vast Southern Ocean. Born of the same plate tectonic processes, Chile and New Zealand have surprisingly similar geography, with vast plains, dense forests, high mountains, and extensive coastlines, all helping to support ecosystems and industries that are similarly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And yet, relations between Chile and New Zealand are underdeveloped. Across scientific and business sectors, there is a need for knowledge transfer of climate change impacts and adaptation strategies, so that we can learn from each other and optimise our response to future challenges. Initiated in 2020, the Winds of Change programme seeks to establish a New Zealand-Chile exchange and develop a collaborative network of future leaders that can identify climate change solutions. The programme selects postgraduate students from Chile and New Zealand who come from a range of academic backgrounds, including natural, physical and social science, business, finance, science communication, and humanities, which are all united by their common interest in climate change and ways to develop sustainable business strategies, practices, and policy. Through field trips, these future leaders get to see the causes and effects of climate change firsthand. Oh, there's a bit of a fern here. And through discussions with scientists, business representatives, and policymakers, they develop a better understanding of climate change impacts and their potential solutions. Participants build on what they have learned and establish new links with other experts by conducting their own collaborative group research projects. Consisting of one Chilean, one Kiwi, and one Chiwi, each group overcomes the challenges of being separated by language, distance, and time to collaboratively investigate an aspect of climate change, its impacts on the environment and society, and the adaptation strategies that are being developed in Chile, New Zealand, and other countries around the world. Finally, the groups present their projects to the growing Winds of Change network via an online symposium. Presentations cover a range of topics and formats, from formal reports and essays, to pamphlets and flyers, posters, and short films. Whatever way the group feels they can best present their information. By examining the similar climate change impacts their societies face, participants in the Winds of Change programme strengthen the interdisciplinary and intercultural alliances between Chile and New Zealand, and help to demonstrate how the sharing of trans-Pacific knowledge can support greater economic growth and social well-being in both countries.
Kia ora koutou. I'm Natalie Reeve. I'm one of the project managers working on the Winds of Change Latin America programme. And I'd just like to take a couple of moments to introduce you to some of the leaders in the Winds of Change programme. So you've already met Associate Professor Chris Moy here at the University of Otago. He's the founder of the Winds of Change programme and has provided brilliant academic leadership over the past 3 years of the programme. I'd also like to introduce David Turner, who's my colleague here at the University of Otago and has been helping to run the programme this year. And I'd also like to thank our former colleague, Ellen, who was running the programme up to a couple of months ago. We've also had some brilliant academic mentors this year, helping our participants to develop their projects and providing brilliant insights and support. So we've had 4 academic mentors based here in New Zealand and 4 in Chile. In New Zealand, we've had Associate Professor Johannes Smith from Massey University, who's provided support in the areas of science and Mataranga Maori. We've had Dr. Gianna Savoy, who's on the call here today, also from the University of Otago, who's provided help in the area of science communication. We have Professor Michaela Baltzarova at the University of Canterbury, who's an expert in sustainable business, and Associate Professor Elizabeth McPherson, also at Canterbury, who's helped our participants in the areas of policy and law. Also supporting us from Chile, we've had Dr. Jorge Leon, providing us with guidance in the area of climate change science. Associate Professor Erasmo Macaya, providing us with additional support in the area of science communication. Associate Professor Hugo Romero, providing us with support in the area of policy and Indigenous cultures. And also Simon Cristomo Loncopan, who's a Mapuche territorial leader, who's provided us with invaluable support in the area of Indigenous culture in Chile. So thank you to all our academic mentors for their support this year. Without you, we wouldn't be able to run the programme. And I'll now pass back over to Chris, and we'll start to see the participants' presentations.
Okay, fantastic. Very much looking forward to introducing the various groups that we have this morning. Our first will be giving a presentation entitled The Albatross, Wings of Change. And it consists of Fionnuala Bullman, Carla Fonesca Paris, and Benjamin Durant-Binet. So take it away, guys.
Yura Toto, olai todos. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be the first group to present to you this morning. And I will just share my screen to get started. Okay, so yeah, I'd like to present a final project report for Wings of Change, Alas de Cambio. The presentation this morning will cover our team and mentors, give an overview of the project and some of the motivations behind why we've chosen this project, go over our objectives and the key messages we wanted to get across, quickly cover our work scheme, introduce our social media platforms, highlight some of the content that we've been posting there, and finish up by reviewing our project using some of the social media metrics. So my name is Fionnuala or Finn Bullman. I'm based in Otautahi, Christchurch. I've just started a PhD in soil microbial ecology. And for this project, I've been working as web manager, so focusing on content creation and keeping our social media accounts up and running smoothly.
Hi, I'm Ben. I started in Chile this program, but now I have just moved to New Zealand. I am also at the University of Otago. I just started my PhD in genetics at the Department of Anatomy. And I have been doing the design and arts on this project because we have to focus on this style to actually provide more enhanced engagements.
Kia ora, buenos dias. Mi nombre es Carla. My name is Carla, and I just submitted my thesis of Masters in Marine Conservation at the University of Auckland, so I'm very excited. And I'm also been helping this project through engagement and content. So what I've been doing is connecting to researchers and organizations to try to get some content into our platform, but also interviews. And we've been helping each other to show, obviously, the albatross. So thank you.
Great, moving on to our mentors. We really want to acknowledge these guys for all of their help with our project. So Dr. Gianna Savoy, with her filmmaking background, she was really able to advise us on some of the storytelling and the best way to connect our audience with our character, the albatross. Dr. Erasmo was able to bring more advice into that science communication story, and especially with his background in oceanography and marine ecology, had some really good insights. So to our project overview, what we wanted to do was bring attention to the multiple ways that climate change is affecting our oceans, but we wanted to do this in a relatable way. And so we chose the albatross, a bird that visits both Chilean and New Zealand shores to be at the center of this awareness campaign. We decided to use Instagram as a platform to communicate this message to a fairly young adult audience, being our primary target group. Now I'm passing over to Carla to talk a little bit more about the motivations behind why we chose the albatross.
So as Finn said, we wanted to have something, a character and something that relate to all of us to actually provide awareness of climate change. And the albatross is such a beautiful bird. If you don't know a lot about it, it basically lives at sea. And we thought climate change and ocean warming was something that we could showcase through the albatross. They're magnificent birds. They have an average of they can reach up to 3 meters long on their wings. And they are such a beautiful bird that actually lives in New Zealand and Chile. And they travel across, as you can see in this map, this is actually tracking the trip of Tiaki, which is an albatross that was raised and bred here in New Zealand. And albatross are also living, you know, in New Zealand, there's more varieties of albatross breeds than anywhere else in the world. And also 50% of the population actually lives in Chile. So we wanted to use Tiaki to get this started and have this conversation about how ocean warming, climate change is affecting this magnificent bird. And we found out that albatross are actually having issues because they're monogamous birds, but climate change is affecting their divorce rates. So what happens is that there's physiological stress because the ocean is warming, and this affects the productivity in the ocean and the food availability for these magnificent birds. So females switch mates, and this obviously helps their breeding rates. So it's something that has been researched recently, and we wanted to use our platform to convey this message and to help people see ways we could also understand climate change, how it really affects birds like the albatross, but also find solutions and connect to researchers and investigators in Chile and New Zealand, and have that platform to connect with them.
So our objectives and key messages that we have been doing around is that first we wanted to introduce the albatross as a character to tell a story about climate change and how the climate change is impacting over this bird. Our second objective was to raise awareness about the several ways that the climate change is actually making a hard life for this bird. And the tier one was to share and connect the audience with potential solution organization or institute where actually we're focusing in research to actually make the life easier and actually understand how broad is the impact over the albatross. So our key message is the climate change is actually affecting this magnificent bird, but there are several ways to contribute its protection. So we started with a work scheme. We first started to develop our project aim, and our logo is very important. As you can see, it's very similar to the image that Carla was speaking about, because we put the albatross in the middle, but you can actually see New Zealand and Chile, and they are connected through the albatross. So then we started to draft and schedule regular posts that we will show further in the presentation how well has gone that. Then we launched our Instagram, and we have recently launched our Facebook page. So we have gone through this platform to actually provoke the engagement across mobile platforms. So here are our social media. I will little a few things if you want to scan the QR code. So our Instagram is Albatross Wind of Change. Our Facebook page is Albatross Wind of Change too. So the connection to Chile, as I was speaking about, is this bird that flies through the ocean through New Zealand and Chile and goes back and forth. And usually you see that Chile or see that New Zealand to actually breed, and then they keep going back and forth. So it's quite interesting, but this climate crisis is pushing the albatross to divorce, to usually because it reduces breeding rate. So the females are pushed to find a new partner because they cannot actually keep up their species. So it's really important because if this keep going on, it's actually, they can potentially go extinct. So as you can see, the ocean warming here is a movie that it has been going up from the 1960 to the 2016, and usually this is quite important because this bird usually spend most of his time on the ocean, and the ocean is actually receiving over the 90% of this heat warming. So it's really a huge impact because it literally affects his world traveling area, right? And it's not just that, the ocean warming also have several other effects. For example, the algal blooms, which potentially indirectly affects albatross to its web, the food web interaction with him. So it's actually also an issue.
So some of our early posts just wanted to educate people about the albatross, such as this one, which was all about the diversity of albatross species. We talked about the fact that there's up to 24 different species of albatross, and that many of them do live around the shores of Chile and New Zealand. These 7 different photos were taken from iNaturalist, which is an app that the public can use to record any albatross sightings or to identify birds that they might see. So that's the kind of thing we wanted to let people know about and bring the message closer to home that these birds were living around their shores and they should keep an eye out for them. Another post was linking the albatross to cultural history. Mita pohoi te roa tera, puaho ana. This translates from Te Reo Maori to like the intensely white down of the albatross, showing that historical link. Maori viewed albatross or te roa as a symbol of power and beauty, and those who wore carvings or garments from albatross feathers were seen to take on some of those attributes. Balls of albatross down were made and worn as ear pendants, known as poho te roa. Feathers were also sometimes adorning the prow of wakatawa or war canoes. And the roi mata te roa is a symbol that's known as albatross tears. And this is sometimes carved into punamu and also depicted on the woven, on the walls of marae in these weaving patterns. Now moving towards some of the potential solutions or ways that are being implemented to protect the albatross. One avenue to look into was into legislation, where the link between Chile and New Zealand was again shown to be pretty strong in the fact that back in 2018, ministers from Chile and New Zealand, from fisheries and from the Department of Conservation, as well as government, got together to hash out this international agreement to protect seabirds, including the albatross, from being killed as bycatch of fishing industry. So not directly linked to climate change, but the fact that there'd been recognition that this bird was struggling and needed extra protections. This then led to the reviewing of the National Plan of Action for Seabirds 2020. It's in New Zealand, where the albatross graced the front cover. And this plan supported the implementation of a hook shielding device on surface longlines, trying to reduce the death of albatross or other seabirds as bycatch. I'm now going to hand over to Carla to talk a little bit more about some other organizations.
Yes, so part of the engagement was to try to connect to other organizations and researchers that are working in the climate change space and with the albatross. And we are sharing through our platform the Royal Albatross Center, which granted us some interviews. And it was really great because we got some more content to have for our page. And if you can see that QR code that's on the screen right now, you can actually go to a page where you can donate to the Albatross Center, and they have an education program that actually focuses on climate change and education for school students and talks about how to protect the albatross. So I had the pleasure of interviewing Laura and Laura Findlay and Janice at the Albatross Royal Centre. So there's a couple of more posts that will be showcased in our page coming up. And I also had the pleasure of getting in touch with Alvaro Gonzalez, and Alvaro actually reached to us through our Instagram page. So it was really great because he was interested in what we were doing, and he wanted to share with us the research he's been doing at the Centro de Observación de la Tierra Emera at Universidad Mayor. And what he works on is actually heat waves in the ocean, which are different to the heat waves on the atmosphere that we're used to. And I want to invite you all at 12 p.m. New Zealand time and 8 p.m. Chilean time for an interview with Alvaro. We're going to do a live on Facebook. So if you haven't joined our Facebook page yet, right at the end of the presentation, we'll give you another chance to scan that QR code. But I want to invite everyone to come and ask us some questions, because Alvaro Gonzalez will be covering the marine heat waves, but also the effects and the impacts on the albatross.
So the most interesting number that we have got so far is the social media metrics that we can obtain through Instagram, and they have went through over 2,300 interaction in the last 90 days. It's a big number. We didn't even expect it, and it's quite nice to know that we have this number. Also, as I was saying, all metrics are generated from the Instagram account, so it allows us to measure our impact of the project and the currently information of our posts. So we have made 17 posts and 59 histories. We have around 293 reactions on our posts and histories. We have reached 449 accounts that they go across Chile, New Zealand, India, and UCA. And our total followers is not right this number because Cape just followed us in Instagram, so it's 163 total followers so far. So we have been also making social media engagement. We have been speaking with some people. We have been making some questions through Instagram. So we also have some interaction with some followers that, for example, someone just told us that a thing that we used to link it through Instagram, it was really his research focus and was actually his motivation through the practice of plastics and waste. So it's really interesting how the people is actually feeling about those posts. So it's a really good feedback that we are obtaining through these platforms. So if you are interested in our stuff and if you want to contact us, you can just go here us our emails and names. And the last one, we will show our QR codes so you can actually follow us. Thank you.
Very well done, you guys. Fantastic, great campaign, and I'm so happy you got you've received a lot of attention and support through these endeavors. So very well done. Just a reminder to the audience, you can place questions for this group and others in the chat, and we'll come back to them in a little bit. We have two question and answer Q&A sessions scheduled for this morning, and it'll be an opportunity where you can interact with our participants a little bit more. So very well done, you guys. So we'll move on here and introduce the next group that will be talking about marine protected areas and climate change. The group consists of Andres Cadiz, Timothy Lawler, Maria Medina, and Selena Reichert. So again, speaking about marine protected areas and climate change. Take it away, guys.
Kia ora koutou. Hello, everyone. Today we'll be presenting to you our project on marine protected areas and climate change. So our group is made up of Andreas, Maria, Selena, and myself, Tim. So myself and Selena have a background in policy, whereas Andreas and Maria specialize in marine sciences. In choosing this topic, we tried to combine this expertise and our dual interests in science communication and policy. So today we're going to share our findings from our research and present to you our science communication tool, which is an infographic. Our inspiration for this project was Andreas. He lives on Juan Fernandez Island in the Pacific Ocean, working in MPA management. It was his idea to focus on MPAs and their significance in the context of climate change, and I'll pass it over to him now to speak about these topics in more detail.
Okay, so Chile and Aotearoa are connected by the Pacific Ocean, which is the largest and deepest ocean in the world. In Pacific Ocean, there are many species and ecosystems, and this ocean support multiple ecosystem service, such as food, cultural service, economic service, and others. In addition, the exclusive economic zone of Chile and Aotearoa are one of the largest on the world. So the decisions that our countries make in their management, for example, in marine protected area, have a local, a national, and global impact. The next one, please. But what is the relationship between these areas and climate change? Okay, well, we know that climate change causes strongly impacting the ocean, altering biochemical process, increasing acidity, temperature, sea level rise, and produce extreme weather events like a storm, flooding, and others. And in addition, human activities can worsen these impacts and further contribute to climate change by releasing carbon stored in marine ecosystem, which support the importance in marine management.
Marine protected areas are areas in the ocean with restrictions on certain activities such as fishing, boat use, etc. Originally, marine protected areas were designed as local conservation tools to deal with local problems and preserve marine environments for human uses such as recreation, to protect biodiversity, habitats, and ecological processes, and for scientific research. Their use as a tool to also protect and strengthen ecosystem resilience in the face of climate change is something that is becoming more and more recognized. By protecting marine environments from additional human pressures, such as some types of fishing, pollution, or other activities, they help support species and build ecosystem resilience. This can also protect the carbon that is stored in, for example, coastal ecosystems, such as mangroves or the seafloor. However, climate change is impacting the effectiveness of MPAs, and often it is not explicitly considered in MPA management. We noticed that in a lot of local marine reserves in Aotearoa, climate change is also not mentioned in the information boards that surround the area, which provide general information on what an MPA is and on species like whales and dolphins that can sometimes be seen there. And so we came up with our science communication tool, which Maria is now going to speak about.
Hi. The infographic aims to show the importance of the marine protected areas in a climate change context to a local coastal audience concise and clear. Therefore, it is expected that this infographic will be displayed in nearby local MPA as information centers, tourist information point, and on the information board near the PM has in the photograph. That direct reach local and tourists and educate them on the role of MPA in the context of the climate change. The infographic was divided in 3 sections. The first on the impact on the climate change on the ocean, such as acidification. The second part talks about how the MPA are a very important tool to counteract this impact and allow the resilience of the ecosystem. And finally, the third part invited us to collaborate and protect the MPA. Selena.
Cool. So Tim talked about the role that MPAs can play in the context of climate change, and our infographic is focused on this, but we also wanted to look at and highlight some of the challenges that we came across in our research and through our conversations with the academic mentors and through Andres's work on Juan Fernandez. So some of the general challenges include that there's often ineffective management and implementation of in marine protected areas. This can be due to a lack of management plans, insufficient funding or support or proper engagement with the local communities. MPAs are also not always set up in the right locations, which means they don't necessarily protect the right range of ecosystems. In Chile and Aotearoa, marine protected areas tend to be set up offshore and not really close to the mainland, which is often in the areas that don't necessarily need protection the most, and they might not be representative of ecosystems that are found closer to the mainland. MPAs are also a Western scientific conservation tool, and their use can often be seen as a continuing form of colonization. The design and management of MPAs at the moment tends to exclude Indigenous worldviews and communities, for example, by preventing traditional or customary fishing practices and disrupting the connection that Indigenous people have with place and culture. In the context of climate change, there are also some more specific challenges. For example, MPAs were not designed as a tool to deal with the impacts of climate change. They were a tool designed for conservation and for scientific study. And so many MPAs, as Tim highlighted, and their management plans don't actually specifically consider climate change or the impacts this will have on the area. MPAs are also, they're a static form of area-based protection, and they're often quite small, and which means that they operate kind of under the assumption that what is in that area is not going to change. But we know that with climate change, species are already changing and migrating to different areas to adapt to the impacts of climate change. And if the protected areas don't move with those ecosystems and are fixed in a certain place, they might become less effective in the long term. So we're quite interested in those challenges and wanted to look at what some potential alternatives to this, to MPAs could be. You could move to the next slide, please, Tim. So just staying in the MPA realm, so larger scale MPAs that span more than 100,000 square kilometers compared to the median size of 2.5 kilometers squared is something that's becoming more popular or more common. And a really well-known example is the Rapa Nui marine protected area, which Andres will talk about a little bit more later. And the size of these MPAs means that they generally cover a broader range of ecosystems, and they can also kind of allow for ecosystems to shift and migrate in those areas and adapt as they adapt to the impacts of climate change. And often these larger MPAs are also multiple use MPAs, which means they have different levels of protections in different areas and allow for different activities, such as different types of fishing, which can be a bit more inclusive of local and Indigenous communities. Looking a bit more broadly, marine spatial planning is another policy approach to manage marine areas, and this aims to strike a balance between ecological, social, and economic outcomes. So within larger areas, spaces are allocated to different uses, such as fishing, conservation, or recreation, and then it's a way of kind of integrating their management a bit more. And MPAs can form a part of marine spatial planning alongside other conservation tools. How effective marine spatial planning is kind of depends on how much weight is given to each of the three different outcomes. And then the third approach that we wanted to look at is ecosystem-based management, which takes a bit more of a holistic view of the marine environment and kind of acknowledges all the species that live within the ecosystem, and including people and how they interact and all the activities that take place in that area and how those connect to each other. And then with the complex and the pervasive impacts of climate change that are going to be experienced by the ocean and are already having an impact on the ocean, this is probably a much more effective way at building resilience than just looking at managing individual species or individual activities or sectors such as fisheries, which is what our current regulations tend to encourage and do. And the concept of ecosystem-based management is also one that aligns more closely with Indigenous or customary approaches to resource management, and implementing ecosystem-based management on a larger scale has the potential to also empower more Indigenous management approaches to managing marine resources in the environment. So these are kind of the theoretical approaches, and we wanted to look at them a bit more on a practical level on the ground. So we talked to some organizations in Aotearoa and in Chile. So in Aotearoa, we talked to the chairman of the Kaikoura Marine Guardians. They're an advisory group that advises the government on any matters related to the Kaikoura marine area, which is shown in this map right here. And they represent Ngāi Tahu, the South Island iwi, the Kaikoura community, biosecurity, conservation, marine sciences, fisheries, tourism industries, and a range of other groups. And they were established through the Kaikoura Marine Management Act, which also established a range of marine management tools in this area, which can be seen in this map. And the tools include a marine reserve over the Kaikoura Canyon, sea mammal sanctuaries, Taiapure local fisheries, which are overseen by a management committee nominated by the local Māori community, Mātaitai, which are developed by tangata whenua and allow for customary and recreational fishing, but not commercial fishing. And from our conversation with Lance, who is the chairman of the Kaikoura Marine Guardians, we learned that what was really key to successfully developing the Kaikoura Marine Strategy, which was then later adopted into the Act, was that the community, iwi and hapu, were really, really behind the proposals. And everyone in the community was aware that they needed a healthy environment and something needed to change, and wanted to protect the area while also still being able to use it, for example, for fisheries. And I'll pass to Andres to talk about Rapa Nui.
So our Chile study case is Rapa Nui, or Easter Island, and there are one multiple use marine protected area and one marine park named Motu Motirohiva, and they marine protect. The marine protected area of Rapa Nui are the largest of South America. For the management of this area, there is a governance body called Sea Council of Rapa Nui, or Consejo Local del Rapa Nui. And this council has government members and Rapa Nui people members. We spoke with Felipe Naoe, the president of the Sea Council, and he told us that the priorities of marine protected area in Rapa Nui are the fishing enforcement, education, and management plans, like very similar to the challenge that we identified previously to speak with him.
To conclude our presentation, climate change is already and will continue to impact our marine environments. MPAs can be a helpful tool to support ecosystem resilience in the face of climate change and mitigate further carbon loss. They are a management tool that has been used for several decades, has systems in place and international commitments behind it. However, MPAs were not designed to cope with the impacts of climate change in particular. They are a Western conservation tool and often do not consider Indigenous worldviews and communities. We need to rethink how we design and run MPAs so that all interests are represented and they are suitable for a changing climate. For example, by having more emphasis on a co-design from the outset, looking at large areas to protect, or creating a network between individual areas. From the 2 marine managed areas we looked at and organizations that operate in that area, we gathered, that operate in that area, the area that we talked to, we gathered that support and involvement from local communities and from those that have interests such as commercial, tourism, or fishing interests is key. When the local community, especially Indigenous communities, are involved in the design, decision-making, and management process, MPAs work well. MPAs in the strictest sense, such as no-take marine reserves, might not be the best or most acceptable option in some cases. Instead, a range of tools that include MPAs might be more effective and acceptable. Thank you very much for listening to our presentation. Yes.
Very nice job, guys. Excellent presentation, and really, this like a topic like this really highlights some of the connectivity between Chile and New Zealand, and it's really nice work that you guys put together. So thank you. Again, just a reminder, you can place questions for this group in the chat, and we'll have an opportunity in about 15-20 minutes to ask questions of the group. I'd now like to introduce our third group for this morning, giving a presentation called Reforestation, the Challenge. It consists of group members Max, Chisa, Carolina, Diana, and Emiliano. So I'll let you guys get your presentation up. There it is, looks good. And I'll let you take it away. Thank you.
Emiliano, I think you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. I was talking.
You're okay, Emiliano. Go ahead, kick us off. Be good.
Okay, my name is Emiliano. I'm from Chile. I live in Concepcion. I'm a geologist. And now I will pass it on to my teammates in order for them to present.
I'm Shifla. I'm a Brazilian Kiwi living in Te Whanganui Tara. I'm working as a policy analyst at Te Mana Raiwa Aotearoa, which is New Zealand Customs Service. Pass it on to Diana to introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. Buenos dias. Kia ora. I am Diana. I am a geologist. I have my majority of experience is about the geotechnical research, geologic studies. Now I try to collaborate with this project. Carolina.
I'm Carolina. I'm from Chile too, and I work in this job specifically help with the scientist information maybe and connect with the communities.
So our team is focused on reforestation, and one of the reasons why we wanted to focus on this is knowing that reforestation is one of the many solutions needed to combat climate change. We focus on it because there are a range of benefits to it, which are really interconnected. And as you can see here, reforestation brings benefits both to individuals through providing fresh air, helps mitigate carbon emissions through carbon capture, promotes biodiversity and economic prosperity for communities.
The main objective about our project is try to encourage people to get into the reforestation activity. And the second one is give to people more knowledge about the biochar, like a new alternative. Actually, it's older, but for nowadays, should be really interesting and try for recovering soil.
Okay, so what we did was to do a research about all the organizations that are working on reforestation, both in New Zealand and Chile. And we talked to them and tried to reach all of them. And this investigation, the first step we did was to find out that they have very different objectives, like as an organization. Maybe someone they are aiming to make like a better quality of life for the people who live in urban areas. Some organizations are working mainly on trying to make like the agriculture in a more sustainable way. Some organizations are also working in trying to make like a cultural transformation by working with the people of the territory. But well, we also did like as a conclusion was that even though they are working like in this wide like objective, this wide objectives they have, they all still have one thing in common. They are all contributing to the like combating the effects of the climate change through the reforestation or the plantation and even growing of native trees and on different scales, because these organizations, there are ones that are very big. There are some organizations that are very small, but they all try to work and they aiming towards the same thing, that is combating the climate change. So we did this further contact to the organizations and hopefully try to reach them and get some answers from them. And we asked a lot of questions, but we base our results on these two big questions. What are the biggest challenges that the organization has faced in leading that reforestation or biochar projects? And regarding the first question, what do they think should be the best way to face it or get any solution? So what we got was mainly they all struggle with the financial problems. They all have like a lack of funding and lack of people who are volunteer or willing to work with them. And they all agree that the best way to face it was making a direct contact with the people who live in the territory, optimizing the resources, trying to make new policies, and also not depending only on donations, because they mostly work on donations, so they are very short of money when they want to do some projects, especially the small organizations. So what we did, because of this information we got, we decided to make an infographic in order to help them, because we make contact with them, and they said they will be very happy if we make some information so they can spread the word. So we decided to make an infographic.
About our conclusion about our research and we working into the project was the restoration is one path we can choose for recovering soil and avoid many environment issues. We had like a flooding or landslides, and also we had to encourage more people to try to participate more about this problem, because could be really like a good option we get about any solution about the climate change. So reforestation programs and biochar programs are now development around the world, and this is a big challenge to try to fix the problem about the climate change.
So we received
Now we will play one video we got from the activity do the Waikatipo Foundation. They are based in Queenstown, and they try to recover in many places around the Waikatipo Basin. So basically they plant native trees to try to recover in not just about fauna and about flora as well, native fauna, flora.
We also received this information, this value information with the Fundación Somos Agua, who they also work with Palta Buena, and they are trying to make this to plant native forest and native trees in order to optimize the agriculture and make it in a more sustainable way by helping in the water cycle. So now we are going to see the results. We decided to make an infographic. At first, we were only going to focus it mainly on reforestation, but since there are a lot of organizations that work not only with reforestation, but also with the climate change, we decided to make it like a more broad focus. So we did an infographic presenting like a very general way. What are the challenges of the climate change? What does it happen? And always trying to compare with New Zealand and Chile, as we're going to give this infographic to every organization from both countries. So we talk about the primary causes that have this the climate change, what is caused.
Carolina, you're on mute.
Carolina, you're muted right now.
Okay, I'm so sorry. My cell phone is just as climate change has its causes, this climate crisis is leaving us with many and varied consequences. and it will continue to depend of something is done to stop the process. These consequences can come at different areas, and maybe from the on the environment, but also minus directly how social community aspects and economic on natural resources and in territories. So it's extremely important that the crisis does not only affect humans, but also on living beings and the planet in general, modifying the climate and the climates and life patterns of all species and biodiversity and ecosystems. Among the main consequences we find in increase in average temperature, but also an increase in heat waves, especially in the Mediterranean area in Chile and New Zealand. Increases fires, forest or no forest, but also an environment warmer and drier. Affect on the ocean, but at the same time, increase the ecosystem duration and biodiversity loss. This is very important because in Chile and New Zealand have a lot of endemic species. In the last for the image, we can see the special species and special ecosystem in both countries. For example, in Chile we have Monito del Monte, we have Copihue or Puma, and New Zealand have a Chiwi. What a special species. And at the same time, the human activities affect their ecosystem, but not the ecosystem, all the ecosystems, all the content. Yes. And the human affects too, the human can be received more severe, and I am so sorry. Yeah, this change affects to more increases in the extreme natural events, and the human can be prepared more for more droughts, more waves, more snows. All time increases more than extreme heats on temperatures, especially in sensitive ecosystem. But the increased drought is very important because the drought affects the food, affects the life, affects the communities. For example, Monte Patria is the first town that migrated because to the drought in Chile, but with the drought, that affects more than a half of the country. It is not expected to be the only one, unfortunately. Regarding native people in most countries, because the native people have a different treatment of the land, which is complex to maintain with less land, and if the climate change. Please, the next. Thank you. This is important for the quality of the life of the whole humanity because the drought affects the production of food, natural food, but all food too, because all processes require water, and also affect our health because the pollution will be more higher in the next year and the next decades. But the climate crisis doesn't affect all people similar or equal form. And the pure people and native people, it's more affected with hunger, with lack of food, lot of water. In Chile and New Zealand exists a different, the different people live in different places. So the native people in Chile will be more affected because they haven't a law for protect them. In New Zealand is different in this case because the native people have a lot of policies for their protection. But in the site, when it rains, which will be very, I'm so sorry, I can't see well. Here, with it rains, which will very little. It will rain hard. When it's hot, it will be really hot. And when it's cold, it will be freezing. So we need act now. But can we do? What action can be taken? Community reforestation is very important because the community reforestation care water consistently and care and respect for nature, respect for culture, express the world, responsible consumption and community actions are very important, are imprescindible. That isn't impossible. It's possible to change this situation, and the reforestation can be helped.
Again, as we said, reforestation is just one of the many solutions needed to climate change. And I know we've talked a lot about the problems that can be caused, but we also wanted to focus on what this means for communities and focus on the benefits. So in this infographic, we've talked about the very beautiful native forests that we have both in Chile and New Zealand, which are vital not just for our biodiversity, but also for our identity. And unfortunately, both have suffered a historic loss of vegetation caused by humans for their own interest. So if you go to the next one, please, Emiliano. We have a few more that actually, this one talks about the policies. So another thing that we did was compare and contrast the related policies, for which Carolina talked a little bit about as well. And this can be used for a number of different audiences, just out of interest as well. Next one, please. So then we talk about why do we actually choose reforestation, and what does this mean for communities? And we tried to make more infographics talking about the holistic benefits of it. Next, please, Emiliano. That there are a range of benefits from it, and individuals might not be passionate about all of them, but we're sure that at least some of them will connect to at least a few of the benefits included, and incentivate or influence them to make their part in reforestation. So I suppose just as a bit of a conclusion, we've made a whole lot of infographics about different things. But what we're really wanting to do is paint a picture about what is the state of reforestation or deforestation in Aotearoa and Chile. What does this mean? What does deforestation actually mean? And what does reforestation mean? What are the organizations involved? And how can you become involved in volunteering through them, or donating to them, or just taking part in spreading the word, for example? And how do you, as an individual, as a community, help solve this huge thing that is climate change? Emiliano, can I pass it back to you to talk about this, please?
Okay, hi team. We might have to ask you to move on to your final slide now. Thank you for sharing all your
we just
wonderful
finished.
graphics.
All right.
But this is the final slide. So we try to make these
I think
infographics.
now we're not run out of time. I think Natalie tried to say we run out about time now.
No, it's okay. You guys just wrap up with your final slide. A final comment is great, and then we'll go to our Q&A session.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so the idea is because all these organizations they don't only work with the reforestation. They have reforestation as one of their tools to make environmental education, for example. So we decided to make this like broad infographic that can be divided from different aspects with different interests. So for example, you can just use this first part of the climate change consequences and causes. And also you can show the reforestation part or how different organizations are working on it. So that's the idea, to have a lot of like angles that you can use this infographic from. And we're already sending this infographic to some organizations here in Chile that are going to use it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys. Excellent presentation, wonderful infographics, and looking forward to seeing them displayed farther afield here. Excellent work. Okay, we have some time for some questions from our audience. Nat, would you like to kind of lead us through some of them? Maybe identify some. If you have a question in the audience, please raise your hand using the reactions function on the bottom of your toolbar there. We also have, I've seen a few questions in the chat as well. Maybe while people are raising their hand right now, maybe we can go to one of our chat questions, Nat?
Yeah, sure. We had a question come in from Nikki from the Capes team addressed to Group 1. She asked, does the Albatross Centre follow groups of albatross to see their movements between New Zealand and Chile, or was it just Tiaki? I'd like to ask Group 1 to address that.
Hi, I can speak to that. Although I don't know for certain without checking back in with the Albatross Centre, I'm fairly sure that they have tagged multiple birds. So I know that each year, we had some videos on that page about the Albatross Centre, and each year their Royal Cam, this live stream that goes onto YouTube with different videos, follows a different family of albatrosses. So it centres on one nest, and there's normally a couple and a bird that is hatched in that nest and then flies off. So in the case of Tiaki, this is a few years ago now, that was the chick that hatched on the Royal Cam and was banded, and therefore that journey was able to be tracked. So I think they generally do track the birds that they capture on the Royal Cam each year. I'm not sure why Tiaki was so much the star. Maybe it was just that it was a very clear journey, whereas albatross maybe are spending more time around the New Zealand coast and not making that journey as often. I hope that answered your question.
That's great, thanks, Lynn. I also had a question for Group 2 about MPAs. So I know that climate change can cause fish stocks to move as waters warm, they move into cooler waters that are more suited to their biology. So I was wondering if in your research you've come across any plans for MPAs to be moved to match where the fish stocks actually are as they respond to climate change. Is that something that governments are taking into account?
I can talk to this one. So the process of establishing MPAs is quite complex, and it takes a lot of years. So it's really not a super flexible tool. I did read about some research in Canada where they're starting to look at introducing like temporary areas to account for how, so they've observed that whales are starting to migrate in different areas. And so they've started to implement like seasonal areas of protection to account for those migratory patterns. But I don't know if there are any plans to really move existing MPAs. I know there are plans, and Aotearoa is working on this, on like creating a network of MPAs that are a bit more connected, that could kind of allow for species and ecosystems to shift across those. But yeah, that's kind of the extent of what our research showed.
That's great, thank you. It's good to hear that at least some governments are taking that into account. I did have also a question for group 3 on reforestation. I was wondering if you could tell us a little more about biochar and what that is and how it helps. And also, I know the academic mentor, Huhana, might want to chip in on this as well, because she's an expert on biochar. David, if you could unmute Huhana.
Oh, kia ora koutou. Biochar, very, very topical at the moment. But firstly, congratulations, tino pai rawa atu ki ngā ropu. Thank you very much for both those presentations so far, just fantastic. So biochar, very quickly, is the carbonisation of wood pruning. So any kind of carbon, I mean, it could be grass, it could be bamboo, it could be whatever. But what we've been doing with biochar is actually burning olive prunings on our farm in Kuku, Horowhenua, and the North Island of Aotearoa. But what biochar is that carbonise, creating carbon and then putting that carbon into low-tech kind of opportunities to clean water systems. So we've been putting biochar into coffee sacks and placing in a stream system, making sedimentation ponds, so that biochar can take up sedimentation, nitrates, phosphates out of water. So it's quite healing for water. But also you can use it as a soil conditioner, but you need to charge it. Like, you can create the biochar, but you need to charge it with worm wee or vermicast or other kind of products to help get that biochar active. Again, that goes in the soil, fantastic soil conditioner. It's a water retention device as well. So when we're talking about drought conditions, maybe we could be seasonally doing things in regards to when we're burning. We're also like seasonally when we're burning, it also means that we're changing the way we farm. We're using the resources on our farms. We're localizing way more for communities. But the whole idea is to get that biochar as a healing product for the damage that we've done to our systems. So currently, I'll just give a little plug to TEAU, Liquid Constituencies, is currently opening in New Plymouth tomorrow, and our group, Te Waituhi Anuku, created a whole biochar exhibition as a research method. So if you want to know about biochar, come and see that exhibition or tune in to the information that's coming out of that show. But congratulations to the team. I think amongst our team, we're really committed to make biochar work in the farming, agricultural, horticultural world, so it actually becomes part of your system. Rather than massive piles of wood being burnt on farms and all those emissions adding to the woes of climate change. So just one small little thing amongst the bigger reforestation initiative that this group is so very, very well put together. Congratulations, MPA as well. Namahi, thank you.
That's great, thanks. I think we'll move to our break now. Thank you to all the groups for your wonderful presentations so far. We've got 3 more presentations to come. We'll take a 10-minute break, so feel free to turn your screens off, stretch your legs, and we'll come back at 9:45 in New Zealand, which will be 5:45 in Chile. So we'll see you in 10 minutes. As
All right, everyone, welcome back. Hope you had a nice break. We'll continue with our symposium here, and I'll introduce the next group that will be presenting their research, their collaborative research findings. And so the title of their presentation is Chiwi, Sustainability Center of Excellence. And we have Katie, Julio, and Alvaro presenting this morning. So I'll pass it over to you guys. Take it away. Looking forward to this.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Can we hear me and see my screen okay?
Yeah, we can. Thank you, Katie.
Perfect. Kia ora koutou and buenas tardes to everyone in Chile. My name is Katie. And with me and my team, we have Alvaro and Julio. I am really happy to be here and present on our project. I guess this came together. All of us kind of have similar backgrounds to some extent across finance and agriculture and a whole bunch of other factors. So myself, I work for ANZ, the big bank here in New Zealand, on the graduate program, and throughout that, I've had some experience in the sustainable finance team. Prior to that, I did my honours at Auckland Uni, looked at sustainability in Latin American coffee value chains. And I'll pass over to Julio to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. Even though I'm in New Zealand, I'm Colombian. I have been the last 3 years doing my PhD here in Lincoln University. My field of studies is agribusiness. I'm focused on organization arrangements and supply chain analysis. And really happy of having this opportunity of working with Katie and Alvaro within the framework of Latin American Center of Asian Pacific Excellence. Now, Alvaro, up to you.
Thanks, guys. Hi, everybody. Hola, kia ora. Nice being here. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Alvaro, and well, my background is in public policy. Well, I am from Chile, from Santiago, but I'm currently in Lima, Peru. As I said, my background is in public policy, and after studying and then working for almost 5 years in between international studies, but mostly in entrepreneurship and public policies. I am now an entrepreneur myself. So I am doing that right now between Chile and Peru. So yeah, my contribution comes also from that side, right? From the entrepreneur point of view.
Awesome. I'm not sure if we can see the screen okay. I seem to be having issues sharing it fully.
I think if you just click on the upper left there, just start the show from the beginning and then see how that works. Will that?
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be working.
This is pretty clear for me if you want to continue.
Cool. Apologies for the tech issues, guys. So yeah, as we mentioned, our name Chiwi came together. We know it's a fusion of Chile and Chiwi. And I guess with the fusion of our backgrounds, we wanted to do something with a tangible outcome. And so we thought, how can we combine the agribusiness sector and the constraints that currently exist throughout New Zealand and Chile, such as access to finance, access to information, because we know that collaborating and knowledge sharing is going to help us find solutions to climate change. And so just a quick overview of the climate finance space and agriculture in New Zealand. Just for context, there's, as we know, sustainability is a very fast moving space. There's lots of changes happening every day, every week. And particularly, there's some particularly big regular changes with legislation that are going to come into effect really soon. So this is going to impact not only the agriculture sector, but also the finance sector. So we've got the National Adaptation Plan. And in 2025, that's when they're looking at implementing an emissions pricing mechanism. So that's going to have huge impacts on farmers, people in the agriculture industry, and also their access to finance and what that means for banking as well. And we're also, I guess, looking to organizations for guidance on how we can decarbonize and what we can do to accelerate adaptation mechanisms for this transition. So for example, there's the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, otherwise known as TCFD, and then there's the nature-related one as well. So our finance sectors are looking to these for almost as guidance because the space is moving too quick to keep up with. And at the same time, we've seen across the last couple of years a huge increase in access to sustainable finance and the issuance of things like green and social bonds, and also sustainability linked loans and bonds. And then moving across to Chile, Chile has actually been a leader for Latin America in the sustainable finance space. So as you can see there, there's just a massive amount of investment that, you know, comparatively to the other countries and neighbors in Latin America, Chile has really been leading it. They were the first to launch a green bond and to issue a sovereign sustainability linked bond as well. However, at the same time, the agricultural sector isn't as high of a priority comparatively to New Zealand, given that some of the dominating industries in Chile are, of course, mining or power. And so moving across to kind of look at the agricultural stats between New Zealand and Chile, on the left here, we have what's going on in New Zealand. Obviously, agriculture makes up a huge portion of the economy, but also our emissions. So it's approximately 50% of emissions that agriculture accounts for. Also a massive amount of our exports. Across in Chile, it's also a large proportion of emissions and exports, although not as much as New Zealand, as we can see. But in saying this, we know that this is going to have huge impacts on, you know, on the land, on the economy. And so, like we said, we wanted to create something tangible, and we often heard that people didn't know where to go, or there weren't kind of hubs of information, or, you know, how do you find access to finance, or just where do you go? Where do you go for information? So we wanted to create a website that had case studies, but also a hub of information and key links for finding like funds and different ways to access finance, essentially, if you're in the agribusiness sector. And yeah, I guess just highlight some of the excellence that's already happening between New Zealand and Chile agribusiness. So we were really lucky to reach out to Ngai Tahu Farming and learn a bit more about their regenerative agriculture project that's going on. So they're currently, I guess, testing for the baselines, and they're set to launch it next year and start measuring. And basically, this is going to create a bankable value proposition, which will have huge reaching international impacts. It's really validating the science of Indigenous regenerative agriculture. And once the results kind of start coming out with this, the idea is that it can be scaled throughout the world, essentially. And we know that in Chile, the largest Chilean dairy producer is actually already modeled off the New Zealand pastoral system. So to some extent, our pastoral systems here in New Zealand are already slightly regenerative, but I guess we can bring in more Indigenous knowledge and make them fully regenerative. And then this not only, of course, is good for the lands, but also it enhances the biodiversity and helps us to reduce our emissions faster. So it's kind of ticking two birds with one stone with those nature-based solutions. Another industry that I'm sure we all know and love is the viticulture industry, otherwise known as wine. This is also one of those key links between Chile and New Zealand. We both have fantastic wine industries. And at the same time, we know, New Zealand and Chile are along similar latitudes. So they're also facing very similar climate risks, and particularly in those wine regions. So there's huge opportunities here to also look at how we can make viticulture more sustainable and engage in that knowledge sharing. And we know that partnerships are key for this. I was really lucky to attend a talk with the head of the World Wildlife Fund, WWF, here in New Zealand. And he mentioned that if you nurture nature, nature will nurture us. And there's such a huge opportunity for capacity and capability building, in the sense that if we partner, larger organizations and conservation initiatives, can use farmers at the farm gate to help deliver on those initiatives that they have going on. And not only that, but we're seeing just fantastic initiatives with some wine brands and wineries across New Zealand and Chile, particularly with their operations, the implementation of solar, and also increasing the biodiversity. So once again, enhancing biodiversity to also reduce emissions simultaneously. So yeah, I guess like the key here is partnerships and biodiversity. That's really, if we can engage in knowledge sharing across New Zealand and Chile, that will really help us to help each other and achieve our goals. And I'll now pass on to Julio.
Thank you. So following the advice of our mentors, we were also looking for narrowing down perhaps our stakeholders. So we wanted to get into a population that we might identify perhaps as the one who gets most of the benefits of creating this hub of people and experiences and knowledge. So we have identified one key component, and I think this is the differentiation from the rest of the teams from Chiwi, and we said, okay, something's going on with indigenous communities, and we identified perhaps, and me specifically from my own experience coming from Latin America into New Zealand, and having this again opportunity of learning how Maori are engaged within economic, within agribusinesses, within society, and how much New Zealand is working in giving back the rights and the adequate space for Maori to be the key component in society. We said, okay, we need to share this knowledge and these experiences back to Latin America. So what we have learned is that both indigenous communities in Latin America and in New Zealand, specifically in Chile, the Mapuche communities, and Maori communities here in New Zealand before the settlements of both colonial powers, they were just working for hundreds and hundreds of years, following just principles of regenerative agriculture. So when we introduced perhaps this colonial model of monocrops, then we began on hurting our land. So one component that we also want to include within Chiwi is how businesses can be very sustainable by including these regenerative principles, what we have been learning here in New Zealand with Maori agribusinesses. And for instance, if Katie, you go to the next slide, please. Thank you. This is just one of the examples, for instance, of what's going on here in New Zealand with this Potmama Trust, in which regional councils are also working towards the development and inclusion of Maori communities within agribusinesses. But then if we just take into account, for instance, in the next one, we can see just how perhaps just a small comparison in how hard it is for Mapuche communities into showing their knowledge. So we have seen perhaps this unbalance in how strong is the support for Maori communities here in New Zealand, and how much Chilean community can learn from this in order to enhance the Mapuche participation within agribusiness. And we just were looking for what's the ideal framework, and we just found something that we said, okay, this is something that we want to use within within Chiwi, and is the Indigenous Peoples Economic and Trade Cooperation Arrangement. So the Indigenous People Economic and Trade Cooperation Arrangement is a multi-government initiative in which the World Bank will deliver the power from governments into indigenous communities. So one thing that we also found in common, apart from all the things that the different groups have mentioned that Chile and New Zealand have in common, is that both of them, they are APEC economies. And this Indigenous People Economic and Trade Cooperation Arrangement is also for motivating cooperation in between economies of the APEC. So we're going to use this IPETCA as the ideal framework for exchanging knowledge, opportunities, and experiences alongside indigenous communities in between Chile and Latin America. Now I hand over to Alvaro.
Thank you, Julio. Thank you, Katie. But we all understand that businesses is a very dynamic part of our world, right? And therefore we know that there's a lot of businesses that are born every day and other businesses that die every day. We see in sustainability and business in particular, as Katie said, a growing flow of investment and also a growing demand for businesses to be more sustainable. And we can see that in agriculture, specifically in demands such as people demanding now products that have certifications, such as the organic certification, fair trade, among others. And therefore, we know that entrepreneurs are facing hardships throughout their different stages of their endeavors, right? So we have divided two parts of the life cycle of the endeavors, and we scouted different opportunities and different resources that entrepreneurs can take advantage of according to their stage. So if we think at the early stage, like the first years of an endeavor, maybe especially in sustainability, we know that financing is a key topic. Access to financing is a hard and difficulty that entrepreneurs face every day because going bankrupt is a reality, right? Investment in the first years of an endeavor is hard, and the earnings are not that high. So therefore, we have gathered different financing opportunities, both from Chile and from New Zealand, and also some of them are more regional, like from Latin America. And we see here that the role of the public sector is critical, is pivotal, right? So we have gathered different opportunities according to the stage and to the characteristic of their businesses and projects. Mainly from institutions such as ministries of environment or indigenous specific tools that are targeting indigenous businesses. But also we have gathered loans that the entrepreneurs now can access in our website, some grants, and so also fewer, but we have included some private funds that are specifically targeting sustainability and specifically in the agricultural sector. So now entrepreneurs can find here different opportunities, different financing opportunities for their businesses to thrive in the first years of development. And going to the next slide. And we know that as businesses scale, they need to start growing their operations, selling more. And in this part, networking is a critical part of this, achieving this successful, right? And here we have also identified different connections, different networking opportunities that now the more mature businesses can take advantage of, such as business council, governmental trade organizations, chamber of commerce, and conservation organizations. So now also if we face, or if some more developed entrepreneur or business person wants to take advantage of our platform, here they can also find some useful resources that we have put together for them. So with that, we are finishing and wrapping up our presentation. I don't know if any last words from the team.
Well, this is, I think this is the presentation that we have for sharing with you, but I don't know, Kate, if we just have 1 minute for showing the working website, because actually I think that the deliverable It's not just a PPT, but is that we just have this hub that is already ongoing.
Yeah, Chris or Natalie, do we have time?
Not really, but I have shared the link to your website in the chat, so the audience can visit your website when they want to.
Fantastic. Yeah, feel free to take a look around and yeah, let us know if you've got any questions. And thank you for bearing with us with the tech issues.
No worries. Thank you, guys. Excellent initiative. I'm looking forward to looking at your website in a little bit more detail. But we'll keep going on here with our groups. Remember that we have opportunities to circle back to this group and others during our Q&A session, which will be just after our next two groups present. You can also put questions in the chat. Okay, so moving on here, we're going to go on to presentation by Gabriela, Aroha, and Paz on Indigenous peoples and climate adaptation in New Zealand and Chile. So I'll hand it over to you guys. Take it away, guys.
Oh, can you hear me now? Okay. Aroha, can you share? So in the meantime, I'm just gonna say good morning, buenos días, kia ora, and good afternoon up there in Chile. Hope everything is having a really nice and informative morning in this symposium.
Aroha said that she can turn
You can share
micro.
yeah.
Okay, just bear with me 1 minute and I'll see if I can share the slides from this end.
Just my should be able to now.
Okay, do you want to try again now, Aroha?
Yeah. Thanks, team. I'm enabled now. Awesome. Can you see that?
It's in process.
Yeah, we can see it now.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. So good morning. Our team developed an Indigenous people and climate change adaptation, a link between Chile and New Zealand. Next slide, please, Aroha. So who we are? So our team is Gabriela Herrera from Chile. She has a master in geophysics, and she's the executive president from CEOs Chile, and she recently attended the COP27, so she's going to give us very valuable insight further in our presentation. Also, Aroha Layton, who is a government analyst from Otago University, and who is speaking, Paz Olivares, Chilean, living in New Zealand for 4 years already. My background is environmental science and a postgraduate in geography information system. Next slide, please. So what we have investigated. So we divide our preso in 3 parts. So why should we consider the climate migration from an indigenous perspective? How are these indigenous people responding now and in the past to the climate change? And if they are being heard, if their perspective have been reflected, in the international stage as well. Next, please. Well, as an output, we have developed a magazine article, which is already published on CEOs Chile, on that website, Gabi's website. So it's very easy to understand, it's interesting, informative, so every detail, you can just go there, scan this QR code, and because this presentation is going to be like an overview of our research. Next, please. Well, we wanted to establish like a framework, like boundaries in our, because this is like climate adaptation from an indigenous perspective is such a broad topic. So we just wanted to focus on threat to homes and communities that these people can suffer. And we also want to highlight what has been done in Chile and in New Zealand from a government and communities perspective. The plan they have begun as well. Next slide, please. And the first part is why shall we consider this threat to communities and livelihood for indigenous groups? Well, the answer is pretty simple because they depend 100% on the natural resources. And they also lived either in the mountains or near the shore where we have seen in the last few decades, like they have been suffered severe consequences. And as an example, I'm just gonna highlight quickly like a real life example. The first climate refugees that were published, it was in 2005, where in Carteret Island in Papua New Guinea, like the authorities raised the alarm that they had to progressively evacuate over 1,000 people from the shore. And these groups, these people, or this community had to evacuate the island and move either, not the island, sorry, the shore area, and move more inside the island, and because of the sea level rise. And yeah, that affect their economic activity, the school, the kids going to the school. They couldn't also like grow any crop because like of the salt, everything was dead. So we could say like these climate refugees start like being known in 2005 or maybe before that as well. So yes, so now I'm gonna just pass this on to Aroha. Thank you very much.
Cool, thank you, Paz, and kia ora koutou. So that brings us to part 2, which was the core part of our project, where we sought to understand how Indigenous people are adapting to climate threats to their homes and communities in Chile and New Zealand. So in the magazine, the first thing we do is identify and acknowledge Indigenous peoples of New Zealand and Chile. And we're not going to run through that today, but just want to emphasize that there are many shared values held by Indigenous peoples in Chile and New Zealand. And we think that these shared values really act as one of the things that binds the countries of New Zealand and Chile. So to answer the question on the screen, we undertook desk-based research, but the key part of our project was interviewing members of Indigenous communities. So in New Zealand, we focused on the iwi or tribe of Ngāti Awa, which is based in Whakatane in the North Island of New Zealand. And we spoke to the environmental manager at the Ngāti Awa Runanga or tribal body. And in this conversation, we learned about how, or the adaptation work underway, being framed up by their environmental plan, which has specific actions to prepare the tribe to adapt to the effects of climate change. And the key message we heard from them was how Ngāti Awa culture is so integral to the execution of this plan. In Chile, we spoke to 2 Indigenous women, Moana, who's from the Mapuche and the Rapa Nui peoples, and Rosanna, who's also Mapuche. And these women weren't official representatives of their people, but reflect their perspective and worldview and the way they thought about climate adaptation. So in New Zealand, specifically from Ngāti Awa, we heard about how they've inhabited the same area for 1,000 years, and retreating or migrating from this land would be deeply painful in a cultural and spiritual sense. They also consider being enabled to respond to climate change as a fundamental human right, and more specifically, the right of Indigenous people to self-determination. They also told us about the flow-on effects of colonial land confiscation and how this means that today a significant portion of Māori land is low-lying and flood-prone, which makes Ngāti Awa particularly vulnerable to sea level rise and flooding in their region. In Chile, we asked Indigenous women representing Mapuche and Rapa Nui people, what would it mean for them to have their lands, to leave their lands in a future where that land has become uninhabitable as a result of climate change. Their answers really made us question whether mitigation and adaptation plans in Chile are being developed fast enough and whether global commitments made at COPs are doing enough. And these women spoke extensively about the link between culture and adaptation, the links between loss of land and vulnerability to climate change, and the very similar discussion to New Zealand. They also emphasised the importance of self-determination for Indigenous people as we navigate the climate crisis. So what can we take away from these interviews? Some key messages on there on the screen. So while there's some early warning signs, stories of cemeteries or urupa in New Zealand being washed away, things like that, we found that climate migration is unlikely to become a very serious challenge for some time, which is a good thing because it gives us time to plan. And being in these early phases, this is really the best opportunity to make sure that Indigenous people are included from the outset. We learned a lot about the synergies between the cultures and the histories of Indigenous people in New Zealand and Chile, although we did find there are lots of different factors that make the Chile and New Zealand context unique as well. And the really key learning from these interviews was the opportunity. The woman that we interviewed offered perspectives that challenged the status quo and the traditional Western perspective of the environment. And that really just skims the surface. There's more detail in the magazine as well. So I'm now going to pass over to Gabby.
Hi. Okay, this brings us to part 3. Are these perspectives being reflected on the international stage? I had the opportunity to participate in the COP27 in Egypt, where some important points or perspectives of the COP27 are: 1, climate ambition was seen as secondary issue. The 1.5 Celsius degree objective is in danger. It didn't have the expected relevance, and emissions reduction commitments to date are not enough. Indigenous perspectives are shared but do not necessarily influence decision makers. Specifically from the Pacific Islands, they want to have a representative who takes their positions, because many times they are not listened to so much but by their own states that have other agendas. Adaptation is a very important issue. Focus on national adaptation plans. The adaptation fund tries to double the money considering new sources of funds, and financing for loss and damage was positioned as the most talked about and political issue, emphasizing its importance to be able to talk about climate justice. Global powers dominate. There is an underrepresentation of women and Indigenous people, and there is no direct space for Indigenous people. All these show us some points related to what is currently happening in decision-making spaces on climate change and the importance of seeking solutions for local adaptation. Next slide, please. And finally, considering everything learned and researched, we believe that the Indigenous people of New Zealand and Chile have a unique context and perspective that needs to be centered in the climate adaptation response. And thank you. This is our QR code where you can find the magazine.
Very well done, you guys. Critically important topic, and you guys have addressed it really, really nicely. Congratulations on your presentation, also on your article. And I see that Natalie posted a link to your article in the chat, so everyone that's in the audience can have a look at it as well. So again, nicely done, and we can circle back to you guys during our Q&A session here in a little bit if there are any questions. So thank you. I'm going to move on to our final group. To provide a presentation on a conversation between rivers, an argument for Indigenous self-determination and ecosystem management. And we have Sarah, Alex, Beatriz, and Javiera presenting. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. Two of our group members have very exciting work and travel opportunities today, so they have recorded their presentations in advance.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah.
I will share now.
Kia ora and ola. Our project is considering Indigenous self-determination and ecosystem management, and we argue that it should be introduced and recognised more widely. Not only does Indigenous-led management help repair historical theft and give authority back to the original inhabitants of an area, but it also allows for more sustainable ways of managing and using the environment as we face the uncertainty of climate change. Currently, the world's mainstream ways of managing the environment are unsustainable and harmful. In our project, we are looking at how Aotearoa New Zealand incorporates Indigenous-led management into the legal framework for one of its rivers, the Whanganui River. We are also looking at an Indigenous Mapuche community and how the current Chilean context may hinder the Chilean government from introducing Indigenous self-determination into law. We are focusing on Aotearoa New Zealand and Chile because they are both geographically similar and both have colonial histories that included treaties which enshrined the authority of local Indigenous populations. Kia ora and allow me to introduce our team in the order of which we're presenting. Our group has members from Aotearoa New Zealand, Brazil, and Chile. I'm Alex, and I have an academic background in law and politics. Bea has experience working on social and environmental development projects. Sarah has an academic background in critical development, policy analysis, and Indigenous environmental management. And Javiera has a background in research and working with human capital. Deciding on this topic came really easily to us. We all had a unique interest in this area and wished to recognise and explore how indigeneity could positively influence future climate change endeavours. Aotearoa New Zealand has some really interesting developments in the last decade, so we wanted to investigate this more and consider any like approaches in Chile. As we have discovered, there are some incredible differences, similarities, and unique aspects to both. I will now pass on to Bea, who can tell us more about how we conducted our project and how we will disseminate it.
Good morning, everyone. Our work is connected to the issue of governance in plural societies, as in Chile and New Zealand, with the presence of a main government and diverse Indigenous communities. We decided to focus on two different strategies for Indigenous self-determination and ecosystem management. One example comes from the Ngati Hau, a Maori community in New Zealand, and the other example comes from the Lof Trancura, part of the Mapuche people in Chile. Next, please. This is a map representing the location of both communities. The Ngati Hau can also be known as the Whanganui Erie, and they're located at the North Island, New Zealand, while the Lof Trancura is located in the Araucanía region in Chile. Next, Sarah, please. So our methods included literature review and a series of online meetings, but these were the main contributors to our work. Dr. Daniel Hikurua, he's specialist in marriage studies from Auckland University in New Zealand. Dr. Elizabeth McPherson, a specialist in environmental policy from the University of Canterbury in New Zealand. Dr. Elizabeth is also a Winds of Change mentor, just like Simon Locopan, which is a Mapuche representative. Simon comes from the Loft Tranquura, so we were able to collect information direct from the source, which is pretty special. And our group decided to write an article to be able to bring the information that we collected beyond the scope of the Winds of Change program itself. So we contacted the Context. This is their website. The article should be published soon. We will circulate the links as soon as it's published. The Context is another platform brought up by CAPES, and they collect information from research and other parts of their network to support business policies and other solutions to climate change issues. I will now pass the word to Sarah and Javi to explain more about those two different Indigenous frameworks.
Thank you, Bia. Our project looks at the environmental management pathways in those two Indigenous communities. So we're looking at Te Awa Te Pua Act with the Whanganui Iwi, which, as Bia mentioned, is one of the peoples that make up the Ngāti Hau in the, across the river. We also look at Loft Tranquora and how they protect their territory from an exploitative hydroelectric dam. We focus on specific territories because every Indigenous community is unique. But just as the Whanganui River and the Tranquora River ultimately mix with the ocean, so too can their communities share their many ideas and values and help each other with their, by understanding their different management pathways. Governments need to address their previous colonial theft. Part of this is recognizing Indigenous authority and practices in management systems. In Aotearoa, New Zealand, the Te Awa Te Pua Act reintroduces the Whanganui Iwi's Indigenous frameworks and worldviews into managerial discourse. It recognizes that the river and iwi are related to and mutually responsible for each other. Its management systems, like having human guardians that speak for the river, reflect Māori perspectives. The Act requires companies to consider the Act's Māori framework when working with the river or its catchment. By increasing the recognition and authority of Indigenous law among mainstream management, the Act helps to decolonize power and promote behavior change among non-Indigenous groups. Community coordinator and former Workin Simon Lonkopan told us that Indigenous values are most important for Loft Trancora's self-determination. The community only wants Chilean legislation that uses Indigenous management systems for the Loft Trancora community. Every Mapuche Loft is unique, so each legislation would need to be relevant to each Loft's worldview. Even the term Loft changes between communities and across time. Currently, Loft Trancora has been exercising self-determination without government recognition. They educate the community on values, management frameworks, and laws. They also consult with organizations and try to speak with the government. When the government has decided to ignore them, they have protest, which has led to some violent military aggression. We are privileged today to see a community-made map that Simone shared with us. Unlike many Western maps, it focuses on how the entire Loft Trancora territory and its community are connected, both physically and spiritually. Loft Trancora understands that everything in their territory is interconnected. In the map, we see the different waterfalls, or chayanco, flowing from the mountains and merging first into the Trancora River, and then the community's oldest Nuatue, which is a space where energy converges. Condors symbolize the connection between the spiritual and material. Just like Te Awa Te Pua privileges the worldviews of the Whanganui Iwi, this map privileges the worldviews of Loft Trancora. Te Awa Te Pua Act is an example for the Chilean government of legislation that recognizes Indigenous values and management. Both communities recognize a spiritual and physical relationship between territory and people. Today's symposium is mostly about projects for adapting or stopping climate change. While the relationship between these Indigenous communities and their ecosystems does contribute to sustainable environmental management, we do not want to suggest that Indigenous management should only be legally recognized because it helps climate change, or helps prevent climate change. The Whanganui Iwi and Loft Trancora hold the ancestral authority to govern their territories, and have sovereignty under relevant Western law through historical treaties. They deserve to have that sovereignty recognized. As part of the human-nature relationship, both Indigenous communities understand that harming their territory harms their people. Both have similar concepts of kutran and mate, which understand that harming an ecosystem causes physical and spiritual harm to the people caring for it. This is one reason Lof Trancura fights so fiercely to protect Trancura River from the hydroelectric dam. In Aotearoa, New Zealand, Te Ao Tupua Act is underpinned by Tupua Te Kawa, which are 4 Whanganui iwi values. The first of these values recognizes mate by noting the river as a source of spiritual and physical sustenance for the Whanganui iwi. Te Awa Tupua is too new to have obvious results from Indigenous management. If there are positive results, it would be very beneficial for the Chilean government to understand and recognize the concept of kutran in management legislation. Now, I will pass on to Javiera, who will tell us about some of the problems in these 2 Indigenous contexts.
Both governments could improve how they handle Indigenous water rights. In Aotearoa, New Zealand, the Awa Tupua Act does not include the water in the Whanganui River. This contradicts how the Act privileges the Whanganui iwi's understanding of the river as an indivisible and living whole. It fragments the river and limits management. Companies can use the river's water without permission from the Awa Tupua's 2 human guardians. By not including water rights in the Act, the Crown does not properly apply Indigenous frameworks. In Chile, El Código de Aguas, or Water Code, has seen recent improvement with reforms that privilege human use and make water rights temporary. The code still separates water rights from land holdings. If the Chilean government introduced legislation for Lof Trancura that excludes water like the Awa Tupua, then Lof Trancura could not legally protect their waterways. The meaning of water to the Lof Trancura surpasses the material conceptualization of a resource. Ko, or water, is a living element with energy and spirituality. It is part of the whole and interconnected Lof Trancura territory. Lof Trancura can speak with the Whanganui River and be aware of the shortcoming in the Awa Tupua Act, while the Whanganui iwi can understand how Lof Trancura currently protects its river from the hydroelectric dam. It is clear from our research and meetings with people like Simon that genuine Indigenous management for both communities must involve water rights. Another big problem with the Awa Tupua Act is legal personhood. The Whanganui iwi have argued in court for 150 years for the right to own fresh water on the Whanganui River. However, the Crown argues that water is a common good and only the Crown can control it. By making the river its own legal person, the Act neutralizes iwi ownership over the river. Simon told us that Lof Trancura wants full autonomy over their management. The 17th century peace treaty between the Mapuche and the Spanish Crown gave Mapuche full control over their territory south of the Biobío River. That treaty was acknowledged by the Spanish king and was upheld for 250 years before Chile broke it and invaded. Lof Trancura wants their sovereignty recognized once again. The Awa Tupua Act uses legal personhood to be similar to the Whanganui iwi's understanding of the Whanganui River as a living entity. But it also means that the Whanganui iwi lack full autonomy over managing the river. Lof Trancura can speak with the Whanganui River and decide if there is a different way they want legislation to approach their self-determination. The Whanganui iwi and Lof Trancura are bound to their environment and feel responsible to protect it. They have the pre-existing authority to manage their territories. and deserve to have self-determination. Legislation that includes their worldviews helps decolonize power and helps redefine human-nature relationships, which leads to more sustainable ecosystem management. Indigenous territories are not just resources to use and sell, but living things that have been connected to their communities since time immemorial. Thank you for listening to our presentation. We are open for any questions.
Very well done, you guys. Excellent presentation. Congratulations on your article as well. As was just mentioned, we have an opportunity here for some questions for this group, but also some of the previous groups as well. Nat, do you have any from the chat that you'd like to read?
Yes, sure. We've had some great questions coming in from the chat. We had one from Kurt, which is addressed to all the teams. And I know that Caro has already answered on the chat, but it would be great to hear from the rest of the participants. Kurt asks you to share any challenges you had in building your team and working at a distance with either Chileans or New Zealanders. In this experience, did you gain any new skills or understanding that you had to develop to make things work? So I'll open that up to any participant to answer. Would anyone like to share your experience of what it was like working with people across the Pacific?
I would say that time management was a really big issue. We only had about 3 or 4 hours a day where both teams were fully awake, which meant we were often trying to organize meetings, not just with ourselves, but also with the other people we interviewed during those times. It just meant everything took a little longer, but as long as you tried not to leave anything to the last minute, it wasn't too bad. Of course, sometimes that still happened. So
that's great. Thank you for sharing some of the challenges you had, and you also managed to overcome them brilliantly. So that's great. Would anyone else like to comment on that question?
Yeah, I would like to give my insight. Despite the time difference, and with Gabi over there running to attend the COP27, I think we could actually communicate very well. I think I speak for the group. We didn't have many issues. We start working, like, let's say, early in this program. And of course, there were time, but we always were trying to reach out, and we were very collaborative, and we kind of matched very well together. So this was a very amazing experience. I think we overcome all the challenges that came on our way. So yeah, thank you very much for the experience, and I'm very honored and glad that I met such an amazing people.
Oh, that's great to hear. Thank you, Paz. We've also had a question come in through chat addressed to Group 5. That's Gabriela, Araha, Paz. Liz McPherson asks, the climate adaptation bill will come through for consultation soon and will likely cover managed retreat. Given how dismissive COP has been of Indigenous experiences, will you be able to use your research to influence this new legislation through a submission?
Cool. Yeah, I can speak to that, and thank you for your question. We actually hadn't considered making a submission on the upcoming bill, and it's a really, really good idea. So thanks for that suggestion, because it's a practical way that we can take what we've learned and input into the legislative process. We did look into managed retreat quite extensively, particularly because the example of the Matata township, where managed retreat took place and being led by the local and regional council, is within the Mana Whenua area of Ngāti Awa. So we did look into it. It also came up when we spoke to Ngāti Awa, and they told us how, because of the flow-on effects of colonial land confiscations, the land that's in Māori ownership is low-lying, and so it's a really, really topical challenge that we talked a lot about, but because it's such a huge issue, didn't really put it into writing or include it in the project in the end. So yes, great idea, and we'll look into it. Thank you.
Thanks, Araha, that's great. We also have a question from Rhonda for Group 6. Are there any political or contextual barriers for the lack of Indigenous legislation in Loft Trancura? If someone from Group 6 would like to take that.
I can take that. So yeah, there are a couple barriers. As you probably noticed, they don't currently have legislation. Technically, it should be possible to introduce Indigenous-based legislation, but it's very complicated based on their current context. I'd say the current issues are probably neoliberal economic reforms enacted under the Pinochet military dictatorship has made the Chilean economy very dependent on foreign investors. So returning water rights makes the situation less favorable for those investors. So the government is incentivized to allow foreign investors to continue exploiting water resources, even as Chile is facing a mega drought and massive water insecurity among most of its population. The state also has a new renewable energy strategy, which primarily focuses on hydroelectric dams. The problem with that strategy is it doesn't address the socioeconomic situation of the local communities where they're placing the dams or the effects of displacement from the mass flooding. And that ties into the water code, which Javiera mentioned. So the water code, which was also enacted under the Pinochet government, separated water rights from land holdings, which means people can own rights to the water, but not the land that it is going to flood. Even though there have been reforms in recent years to make water use rights temporary to about 30 years, privilege Indigenous use, and I think also privilege human use over commercial use. The fact it still separates those two really does impact how water is used in Chile. Luckily, there is some good news. There appears to be in general a social shift in awareness around the climate crisis and on Indigenous rights, which we can best see through the mass protests in 2019, which led to drafting a new constitution. And also from that, the public voted for very progressive and environmentally centric individuals to write that constitution. So even if the constitution didn't get through, it does seem there is an interest in doing that, and we should see another constitution come through in the future that will be accepted. I'm turning blue.
That's okay, sorry, don't worry. Thank you for that interesting information about the Chilean context. That's really helpful. So I also do have a question for Group 4. If anyone has a question from the floor at all, feel free to use the raise hand function in Zoom and we'll come to you. In the meantime, I'd like to congratulate Group 4 on putting together a wonderful resource in your website. We were wondering about your plans for promoting your website to businesses so that they can draw on your resources and you get maximum impact on what you've put together.
Hi, I can answer this one. Sorry, I'm still having tech issues. I guess there's so much more that could probably be added, even though we're really happy with the outcome now. It would be great to find more funding so that we can promote it to others. I guess, yeah, probably at this stage we'll be relying on word of mouth and just promoting it organically, but very much open to any ideas. Yeah. I guess we hadn't envisioned the next steps, but the idea was definitely to create something that would be useful to people within the business space.
That's great, Katie, thank you. And we have posted a link on the CAPE's website, so hopefully that will direct traffic towards you. So I can't see any raised hands. And we are running out of time now. So I think we will move on to our closing remarks. Thank you for your questions, everyone. And thanks for the participants for your really insightful answers. I'll hand back to Chris now.
Okay, thanks, Nat. I just want to close with a handful of really sincere thank yous, primarily to the participants. Like, wow, fantastic presentations, fantastic projects. You guys just demonstrated such a high level of intelligence, poise. It was just so nicely put together. And I know that took a lot of work. And as was highlighted earlier, you know, these challenges of communication across the Pacific and the time zones and the work schedules are really complicated. And you guys gave up a lot of your time and your energy and your efforts towards this program. And we're just really, really grateful. I want to say, you know, seeing these presentations and seeing, you know, the things that you guys are up to is just so impressive. And I think as you guys launch your careers over the next few years, I am just so grateful that these are the kind of things that you're thinking about and you'll take forward with you. You know, these topics, these problems, these challenges that you'll take forward with you in your careers. And as you continue to work together to kind of solve many, many, many challenges that we're facing. So a big thank you, lots of gratitude to you guys. Well done and big congratulations. Secondly, I'd like to thank the Winds of Change team, Natalie, Elaine, and David for your hard work this year and really kind of driving this program forward. It's been another year where we've had some, you know, just certainly some disruptions that made things a little bit challenging, and you guys really took the lead and were really the key drivers of this program. So really a big round of applause for those guys. They are just fantastic for their hard work. So thank you. Also, big thanks to our Winds of Change mentors, as well as workshop presenters that kind of provided a lot of their time and input throughout the year. Fantastic workshops that were really well attended and just really important learning opportunities for our participants. So thank you for that. A big thank you also to Craig Nicholson at LATAM Cape for, you know, being the glue of the program and bringing in a lot of his colleagues and collaborators from Chile and really just raising the really the flag for LATAM Cape, but also the Winds of Change program. He's been just a tremendous supporter of this program through time. So thank you, Craig. And Craig, I'm going to pass it actually over to you to close this out.
Great, thanks so much, Chris. Yeah, just to total support everything Chris just said. All of our wonderful team at the Capes, with Nat, David, a whole number of us that just pulling together connections, knowledge to present an amazing opportunity and program. But just quick words to all of you, the participants, in terms of how you've walked into the space, overcome your challenges. And I'm just amazed by what you've demonstrated, both in terms of application and recommendations, and then offering pathways to us and other people's. So thank you so much. And I like to think of this web we're creating across the Pacific to Chile, which is getting increasingly stronger. So thank you again for all of your contributions and to the presenters and to the academic mentors. Amazing stuff. And I can only say viva Chile, viva Aotearoa, viva los Chiwis. Let this all continue. So in this beautiful spirit and closing, on behalf of Matthew, all of our LATAM Cape team, and Nat, Angela Davis, all of our beautiful Capes Consortium, thank you so much, everyone. We'll close with a traditional incantation, Māori incantation, which is really appropriate for this. Just give me a second and I'll just copy this into the chat so you can all join in, but there's a key part where I really need you to also participate in this. So just let me do this copy and paste really quickly and we'll get underway with this. Okay, so I've dropped that into the chat. What I need you to say and what we basically do with this, it's we're moving away the restrictions from the sacred space of dialogue and engagement and to get back to our everyday activities. A really important part for you to support this is affirming when we come to the end, when I'll say homie hui, and then we all need to say taiki as a whole collective together, which is literally everyone saying they affirm this, they join in with us. And this, if you like, is the great metaphor for the Winds of Change program. So we'll just do a little practice on that. So I'll start just that final line and I need you to say taiki as loud as you can. So if you want to turn off your mute so that you can actually be heard and we all hear our voices, let's do that. So let's practice. Here we go. Homie, hui. Oh, I'm sure we could hear that all the way through to Chile and back here, so it sounded wonderful. Okay, so here we go. I'll start the karakia. It is in the chat, so have a look at it.
Yeah.
And do say it along with me if you would like. Okay, me karakia tātou. Kia whakairia te tapu, kia wā te ai te ara, kia tūtuki whakataha ai, kia tūruki whakataha ai, haumi e hui e. Wow, that was wonderful. Well, fantastic, and thanks for a spectacular Winds of Change program, and to everyone who's been here today. Nat, if I hand back to you, do you have any last words? Pass that final word to you.
Thank you, Craig. I'd just like to add to the thanks to all the participants for your hard work in putting your projects together and sharing them with us today, to Chris as the founder of the Winds of Change programme, to all the academic mentors for your insights, to the Winds of Change team, especially Craig, for really being, as Chris said, the glue that joins us to Chile and makes a lot of vital connections. And thanks finally to all the audience for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the presentations. We will be putting the recording of the symposium up on the CAPES website very shortly. So if you want to revisit any sections, that would be great. So thanks again to everyone, and we'll close the meeting now. Thank you.